I'm glad to see so many members of the commission have made it tonight, and our guests for the Charter Review Commission meeting on August 4th. I will call this meeting to order at this time and do the roll call members. I'm going to do this time, probably our secretary will probably do it in future meetings, but I wanted to this time kind of review the appointments and where they can, not only the names of each of us as I call roll, tell if you're there, but also remind everybody your appointment status from who you were appointed. I'm here, Steve Henson. I was appointed by the CEO. Our vice chairman, Virginia Harris, was appointed by the CEO. Is she here?
Yes.
Thank you. Claudette Leak was appointed by the House delegation. Is she here?
I'm here.
Thank you. Mary Hinkle was appointed by the House delegation. Our secretary, is she here?
I'm here.
Lance Hammond was appointed by the Senate delegation. Is he here?
I am here.
Thank you. Robert Rittenstein was appointed by Commissioner Robert Patrick. Is he present?
I'm here.
Good deal. Susan Nugent was appointed by Commissioner Jeff Rader. Is she present?
I'm present.
Bobby Sanford was appointed by Commissioner Larry Johnson. Is she present? Bobby Sanford is not present at this time. Claire DeLay was appointed by Commissioner Johnson, Marita Johnson. Is she present?
I am here.
Thank you. And Jim Grubiak, I know, is traveling. He was appointed by Commissioner Ted Terry. Did he make it on?
He is in Greece and he's going to try, but he has spotty internet is what I understand.
Thank you. Dwight Thomas, I think he's riding motorcycles, but with us still present. He was appointed by Lorraine Johnson. Is he here?
Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, we have our school board chairman, Vicki Turner was on. Is she still with us?
I am, and I was appointed by CEO Tom.
Thank you. And Carla Drenner, the House chair, is an ex officio member. Is she present? Don't think so. Karen Bennett called me. She may check in. I don't know if she's here. She's a House appointee and a House member. I don't think she's here, but I know she was at the airport picking somebody else. Gerald Austin Sr. was appointed by Steve Bradshaw. I think he might be traveling. Ex officio Senator Emmanuel Jones. And then it's presented to me the House alternate John Turner, I believe, is with us. John earlier.
I am present. Thank you.
Thank you. So I appreciate you all being here and appreciate you taking the time to continue our work on this. And I appreciate all the work that we've done so far, our knowledge that we've gained, and hopefully work for the future. You were sent the minutes from the previous meeting. The secretary reviewed those thoroughly and, interacted with the county and made sure that they were proper and good, but there's always a chance for revision or change. Is there any comments or requests to change or alter the minutes as they stand? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move we approve.
Got a motion? Is there a second?
There is a second.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any further debate, discussion, or any request to amend? If not, it's
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Ms. Leak, I believe, is trying to raise her hand.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank
That's
you.
okay, no problem. I was looking at the meeting, it's a minor correction, but there were references to the Charter Review Commission as the board, and I'm just suggesting that we change it to reflect commission.
Thank you.
And I also had a question for the county attorney on page 2. The second paragraph, there was a note or an indication that when we were talking about the bylaws.
So when we have an important vote, she thinks I should go down the roll, which is appropriate to make sure we record each member's vote because, if I'm just asking you to raise your hands or asking for a voice vote, it may not be accurate. And anything at all of substance, she's thinking that I need to go down the roll. Is that correct, Vivian? Is that?
Yep, you are a great co-counsel, sir. You're hired.
Good deal.
Well, thank you for clarifications.
Especially because we're on Zoom. When we're back in person and everybody can see everybody's hands and the clerk can see everybody's hands, it makes it a little easier, but it's harder on Zoom.
Yes, and
Makes sense.
I'm glad you brought it this proper time to do that during the minutes, because I was about to not follow that advice for the minute. On very simple matters that don't have any controversy, and that's why I made sure I asked, did anybody have any objections? Make sure everybody has time to comment. You know, for something like that, I will probably say, if there's no further objection, the minutes will be adopted by unanimous. So at this time, I would like to adopt the minutes by unanimous consent if there's no objection. Okay, thank you very much.
Nice job, Senator.
Good. When we get to bylaws, though, Vivian, I will roll the call the roll. At this time, my special guest is our county attorney. So we will roll on with your presentation.
Yep.
As you all know, last time did a stalwart job giving us information, but we do need to move quickly through this if we're going to be able to get to the other topics at hand. So I remind everybody that in the future, we'll probably have some help. The CEO and county executive assistant and county attorney are all working to make sure we have some help coming from Carl Vincent or other sources. So we'll probably have some people, if it's minor, you might reserve it and we'll get some questions answered later on. If it's important and you need the clarity, then county attorney has said she doesn't mind being interrupted. So thank you, county attorney.
And if you all want to, ask your chair if there are questions afterwards, I'll be glad to try to answer those at the next meeting. So I will jump right into it so that we get started. We are starting with section 10. And it is audits. And instead of reading each one of the paragraphs, I thought I might move a little more quickly, Senator, if I simply describe the important provisions. In subsection A, the most important provision you need to look at is the very first sentence. It is the creation of an audit committee. It is the only committee of the Board of Commissioners that is required by the Organizational Act. It is today referred to as the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee, but it is section 10 represents an important power of the Board of Commissioners, and it is the power to audit. And so there is a standing committee of the Audit Committee. The term, the members, all of that, commissioners, is set forth in the standing procedural rules, which is a document I'm going to get to you when you get a box of documents from me. Right now, that committee is composed of 3 members, like the remaining committees, and you'll see how committees are chosen when we get to the powers of the presiding officer. The second sentence of subsection A refers to what is called the Certified Annual Financial Report. You have worked in government, they technically call it the CAFR. It is the annual audit that the county is required to perform. And it gives the audit committee the right to screen and recommend an independent auditing firm. And so that is a carve out of power within the CEO to the Board of Commissioners. Section B talks a little bit more about that outside auditor and how that outside auditor shall be hired. There's got to be a written contract. The contract's got to be entered on the minutes of the Board of Commissioners. The contract's got to clearly define the scope of what that auditor does. The important and the good news about all of that is that if you get to the middle of subsection B, 3668, state law defines auditing principles, and the certified annual financial report is a term of art. And so there are certain auditing principles that apply to any audit, whether that audit is done by Fulton County, Gwinnett County, DeKalb County, the state. And so those principles are in effect and guide and determine what the outside auditor does. And the auditor is required, this state law is still in place, to conduct its audit in compliance with applicable law. The General Assembly saw fit and has for a number of years set forth certain requirements for counties and cities and their auditing practices to ensure that sort of the audits all look the same, they all contain the same information, and they all have the same amount of reliability. One part about section 10 that I'd like to draw your attention to is if you look at our little explanatory phrase, you see it says Acts 1981, 4304. As you know, as you've learned, that's the original organizational act. The next says Act 1915, page 3826. Well, commissioners, that's just wrong. That is a typographical error that I'm going to need to fix with Muni Code. It is actually 2015. So it is a change that was made in 2015. I'm going to talk about that change in the next section, but I did want you to know that we're not going back to 1915 prior to the organizational act. And what the change in 2015 did in section 10 and section 10A. First of all, in section 10, it deleted a paragraph that I'm going to talk about for a minute. And in lieu of that paragraph, instead of that paragraph, it enacted section 10A, which is an independent internal auditing function, which consists of an oversight committee and a chief audit executive. So in 1981, the power of the Board of Commissioners read as follows. The audit committee, so that's the audit committee of the Board of Commissioners, may also screen, interview, and recommend to the commission an internal auditor whose function shall be to audit the various departments. The internal auditor shall be employed and shall serve at the pleasure of the commission. So this is one of those carve-outs. Almost all county employees serve at the pleasure and under the supervision of the CEO. The internal auditor in 1981 was to serve under the direction and control of the Board of Commissioners. That paragraph in 2015 was deleted, and instead of that paragraph is what we are going to move to very quickly, and that is section 10A. Section 10A sets up an oversight committee and a chief audit executive. And that chief audit executive is similar to the internal auditor that I just mentioned. There are two functions of the independent internal audit. And John, if you'll just stop at A1 for me for a second. Number one, and this is in paragraph A1, and it's the only part I'm going to read to you. They have two functions. Number one, if you look at the second line, the first function of the audit oversight committee and the audit executive is to determine if government funds are handled properly and in compliance with laws and regulations. That's its first function. It has a secondary function. The secondary function is to determine if public programs are achieving the purposes for which they were authorized and funded, and whether they are doing so efficiently, effectively, and equitably. The rest of A1 and the rest of A2 is a policy statement of why you need audit and why auditing is an important function of government. So I am going to move from, let you all read that on your own and move into the specifics of the Office of Internal Audit. So as you will see in subsection B, the head of the office is called the Chief Audit Executive. He has the right to hire assistants, employees, and personnel. He has, or she has, depending upon who is appointed to that position, has the sole authority to appoint, employ, and remove the employees within that department. So, CEO, Board of Commissioners, no one else has any control over who is hired in the internal auditing office. The second section, subsection C, is an extremely important section. It is very clear that the Office of Internal Audit is independent of everybody. I have no control over the Office of Independent Audit. It is one of the very few departments I do not represent within the county. It has its own lawyer. I represent almost everybody else in the entire county except for the Superior Court judges. But the Office of Independent Audit is independent and it cannot be controlled by the CEO or the Board of Commissioners. Subsection D talks about the appointment process for the Chief Audit Executive. It allows the Audit Oversight Committee to interview and essentially come up with a short list of no less than 2 and no more than 2 to recommend of an appointment to the Board of Commissioners. And it does provide sort of a clawback kind of provision, which is if the appointment of the chief, if the Board of Commissioners doesn't appoint within 30 days, then the appointment right for the Chief Audit Executive reverts to the Audit Oversight Committee. That is subsection D. Subsection, it's misnumbered. You see, I just noticed this. It says D twice, Commissioners. So again, a mistake we've got to fix. We'll fix that. The second D is actually a relatively regular term. It is defining when a vacancy exists and the term of office. So the term of office for the Chief Audit Executive is 5 years and until his successor is qualified and appointed, which is very normal. And they can only serve 2 terms of office. Section E provides the requirements for the job, and you can read those. I don't know that those are, I'm not going to go through those in great detail. They're pretty self-explanatory. Section F requires the position to be nonpartisan and that qualifying for election to public office constitutes an immediate resignation from the position. Section G. Yeah, excuse me, I'm tired this evening. I apologize. I think I'm trying to hurry. The subsection G defines the powers of the audit executive. And so obviously the overriding power is in the first section, and that is to conduct financial and performance audits of all departments, offices, boards, activities, and agencies of the county. And then, so you do that audit. You have the performance audit and the financial audit. And those audits should show the provisions found in 1 through 7, okay? So as you are doing, as the Chief Audit Executive is doing his or her work, they should be considering these 7 provisions. The first is whether the act is authorized by state law or federal law, and whether the acts are being conducted and the funds expended in compliance with applicable law. The second is whether the department or the agency is managing, protecting, and using its resources economically, efficiently, and effectively in a manner consistent with the objectives intended by either the authorizing entity, that could either be the Board of Commissioners or the CEO, or could be the General Assembly, or in conformity with whatever law created that department. So for example, you know, the law creates a public defender. Is the public defender complying with the law, the state law that created that office? The third is whether the entity and its functions are effective, including identification of inefficiencies or uneconomical practices. As you can see here, there is a focus on efficiency and on finance, which makes good sense. That's what auditors do. They focus on those kinds of things. The fourth says whether the desired results are being achieved. And the fifth is whether the financial or other reports that are being provided disclose fairly and accurately and fully all of the information required by law. And then we move to 6, whether management has established adequate operating and administrative procedures and practices involving that can include internal control systems, accounting systems, and internal management control. And then the seventh is what you could imagine is if there is any indication of fraud, abuse, or illegal acts, which require further investigation. And as we go through this, you'll see that there is a requirement for reporting by the internal audit executive in certain circumstances when he or she believes that there is either fraud, abuse, or criminal activity. I'm not going to go through H in long detail, but suffice it to say, it tells everybody who works for DeKalb that we have to comply and produce documents and papers to the audit executive, and includes the last sentence is a right to audit clause that is in every single one of the county contracts. So that right to audit clause is found in the sentence that says, further, all contracts with outside contractors and subcontractors shall contain a right to audit clause. And that is in the county contract. Subsection I defines what the auditor's extra powers are. So the auditor has the power to hire and obtain. So usually it's done by contract, outside CPA, qualified management consultants, or other professional experts necessary to perform audit work. It does define some of the rules that would govern those folks. So you can't hire somebody who has a financial interest in the government or its officers. So I'll give you a sort of a dumb example of that. You can't, my husband's not an auditor, but you couldn't hire my husband, right? To do work for the internal audit executive. The audit also gives the auditor the right to coordinate and monitor the external certified CAFR audit that I described in section 10 just a few minutes ago. And so what that says is the way to get the CAFR auditor is to go through the normal contracting process, and that participation and oversight by the audit oversight committee is in that process, is provided for in that process. But it is clear that the right to decide which firm does the external audit is still within the Board of Commissioners. So that is the last line of that sentence, is that power is left with the Board of Commissioners. It is not given to the Audit Oversight Committee or the outside auditor. Section J, and I'm not going to go through each of these subsections. Section J talks about how audits are done and follows what I have been told is a typically normal process, but I am not an auditor. And as anybody who works for the county or has worked for me, nobody lets me do mathematical analysis of any kind. I am a terrible mathematician. I'm a word girl, not a math girl. But essentially, at the beginning of each fiscal year, the chief audit executive is to submit a plan to the audit oversight committee and to the commission. It's a 1-year and a 5-year plan. And essentially the plan is required to sort of go through what audit he or she plans to do. And usually in order, we're going to audit the law department first, we're going to audit the health department second, we're going to audit the purchasing department third, or whatever the schedule is, or the specific issue. And the auditor is given the authority to determine to select the audit plan, to try to keep some, I would assume, objectivity and independence. The auditor is required to consult with others as to the scope and the nature of the audit. Section 4 is the paragraph that is provides that the audit executive is to give, and this is normal in regular auditing if you've ever been through an audit in a governmental capacity, give the audit to the department or the agency, and it is in draft form, and it is designed to allow the agency an opportunity to respond in writing, correct factual mistakes. So for example, if you were auditing the law department and you said the law department, in the audit, you said the law department had 40 lawyers, I would need to correct that because I only have 21 lawyers. So it's things like that and allows for responses from management. Those responses are then considered and then the final audit is released. Because sometimes in the draft, when the draft was done, using my very simple example, the auditor goes back and makes the change, right? Oh, you're right. There are only 21 lawyers in the law department. They're not 40. The audit report, the final report and what it should contain is discussed in subsection 5. Background, findings, recommendations, and communicating results to the Audit Oversight Committee, the auditing agency, and the governing authority, that being both the CEO and the Board of Commissioners. Section 6 is not an unusual requirement in government. It is the requirement that the auditor, the chief executive audit, the chief auditor provide an annual report to everybody, the Audit Oversight Committee, the CEO, and the commission on an annual basis. And it defines what that annual report must contain. So subsection K is where the auditor is required to make certain reports to both the district attorney, the governing authority, the Board of Commissioners, and in the event that he or she finds something that is, in his or her opinion, abuse or an illegal act. The auditor is required to follow up to see if corrective action is taken pursuant to the audit. So if they make a recommendation that something be changed within a department and the department agrees that's a good suggestion, auditors, we're going to do that, then the auditor is required to follow up and see if the change has been implemented. The section M is peer review. It does not contain a time period, but it does require the audit activities of the office to be subject to a peer review in accordance with applicable government auditing standards by a professional, nonpartisan, objective group utilizing guidelines endorsed by the Association of Local Government Auditors, which, as you can imagine, is the association that governs auditing for local government all across the country. And then the independent report and the peer review. For those of you that are not familiar with peer review, it's usually when somebody who does the same thing you do, your peer, looks at you, how you run your office and what you do, and does it make sense, and is it within the normal guidelines? And so that's what a peer review is. And I'm not gonna, unless there are questions, I'm not gonna go through N sets forth the requirements to be a member of the Audit Oversight Committee. So there are 3 professional requirements, and all 3 apply. You gotta be a resident of DeKalb, you gotta have experience in performance auditing, and then you have to have a certain level of experience in auditing or accounting, 5 years or 10 years in alternative experience. So you cannot be, I would never be allowed, I'm a resident of DeKalb County, but I would not qualify to serve on the Audit Oversight Committee. I don't maintain the experience identified in DOC, and being a lawyer is not relevant to being an auditor. The Audit Committee is appointed by members of the delegation, the House delegation, the Senate delegation. 1 member is appointed by the CEO and 2 members are appointed by the commission. And then subsection 4, each person serves for a term of 5 years. And then, as you can imagine, there is a staggered, so that when you started in 2015, you didn't have everybody come on at the same time and everybody come off at the same time. That is a perfectly normal, regular part of committee and or law that provides for committee membership. 5 deals with successors and when they are appointed and their term. 6, somewhat like the chief audit executive, deals with how an auditing, somewhat like the chief audit executive deals with how and when a member of the audit oversight committee is to be removed. So if you move out of DeKalb, you're out of a job. You're not you got paid for that job, but you're out of the appointment. Can't continue to hold it. And it is they utilize the state law statute for vacancies in other offices, and that is 4521. That statute is still in force, and that citation is correct. So it is using the reasons in 4521 and requiring that the ineligibility be established by the decision of a court of competent jurisdiction. So if there is a disagreement about whether, there's not going to be a disagreement if somebody passes away, but if there is a disagreement about it, then there is going to have to be a court order determining that that position is vacant. And there is the ability for the ineligibility to be determined by a vote of 2/3 of the members of the legislative delegation. 7 is technical. It allows the members of the committee to elect their chairperson. And requires the audit oversight. 8 requires the audit oversight committee to work with the auditor. And the audit oversight committee functions and authority and responsibilities are set forth in 9, and that is 9A through L. So the first one is one of their very important functions, and that is selecting the recommended appointee to the Board of Commissioners for the Chief Audit Executive. They are then given a number of duties and powers which involve monitoring, reviewing, conducting audits, reporting problems. G is the next one that I would go to. G is the power where they are given the oversight for the request, the oversight authority for request for proposal and selection process for the firm conducting the annual financial audit, the CAFR. And that is a change because typically the RFP process is controlled out of the CEO and out of the purchasing department. And this is a change to that. This gives that audit oversight committee and ultimately the Board of Commissioners the authority to be involved in that process when you go to select who your capper is. And typically that's done about that contract because, you got to get to know your county, you got to get to know your finance director and your budget director and your various officials. But I've seen it in DeKalb, don't hold me to it, but typically the audit contract lasts usually around 5 years, maybe a little bit more, and then it's put back out for competitive procurement. Now, with COVID, a lot of things have not been put back out for competitive procurement that would have otherwise when we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. But that's typically what I have seen is 5-year contracts. They are annually renewable. And then the H is the audit oversight committee is given the responsibility to help evaluate whether the external auditing firm is doing its job and evaluating the recommendations of peer review and then consulting with the auditor, maintaining the confidentiality of personnel matters, and then annually meeting with the members of the commission to discuss control systems, risks, performance of the audit firm. Number 10 is what I told you earlier, why I'm not the lawyer for the audit oversight committee is the audit oversight committee has the authority to hire its own outside experts, including legal counsel when necessary. And in fact have, I think she is still working. Some of you may know her. She is Mary Carol Cooney is retired from the city of Atlanta and she acts as legal counsel to the audit oversight committee. And then the second is the final section O is a severability provision. And what it says is any portion of 10A is deemed by a court to be unenforceable, unconstitutional, invalid. The rest of 10A remains in effect. And that is a typical provision that lawyers put in bills. You see them in almost every bill enacted by the General Assembly, almost every ordinance enacted by the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners. So that's not an unusual one.
Madam Attorney, through the chair, Mr. Wittenstein has a question, it appears.
Yep, and I'm done with section 10A, so that works.
Yeah, that's right. And I wanted to just touch on it before we move past 10A. I didn't see anything in there about how you remove or fire a chief audit executive if they're doing a bad job. In other words, if they're not coming into work, or they come back from lunch drunk every day, or they're creating a hostile work environment, until they get to 5 years, I didn't see anything that allows anybody to actually remove them from office.
Thank you. Vivian, do you have any response?
So I'm gonna take that under advisement, Mr. Wittenstein. I think you may be right, but because I like to be precise, I think I need to go back and parse every word of 10A, but I don't, looking at it, and I did read it again today, I've read this several times in preparation. I don't see that there is any power of removal.
Yeah, and as I was listening to you, I was waiting for it and I didn't hear it.
Vivian, there may be a state statute that kind of covers that as a general law. I think under Title 45, I don't know, you might want to look at that. I
Okay.
think there may be a state statute that covers removal of public officials.
And I also think there is a body of law that I've got to talk to my employment lawyer about. Sometimes when you're appointed to a term of office, there is a limitation that Georgia law generally applies to the ability to remove you during that term. And you're right, Dwight, I need to go back to section to OTGA to 45 and see. So if you can put a pin in that, I will get you an answer on that. It's a very good question. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. We'll look forward to an email.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chair, I believe Ms. Turner may have a question.
Thank you. Thank you. Vivian, I just wanted to make sure I heard something correctly. This
Yes,
is
ma'am.
under section 10A, letter D as in David. I thought I heard you say, I read that it says that the auditor shall be appointed by a majority vote of the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners from a list of not fewer than 2, nor more than, I have 3. Is it 2 or 3?
Not 3.
All right,
So you got to give them at least 2 names. And you
okay.
can't give them more than 3 names.
All right, thank you for the clarity.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions on that? John, you see anybody?
Not at this time.
Okay, before we move to the last session, Vivian, is there any other commentary that you want to make? For instance, has that section or the auditor, has there been any glaring problems with appointments not being made by the proper bodies or not being remade at the proper time or vacancies? Do you think?
There is a vacancy right now in the office of the chief and the audit executive. There was a nomination process that was done. The board made the appointment within the 30-day requirement set forth in the statute, and there was a disagreement over terms and conditions of employment. I am not privy to that. I think it may have had something to do with money. And the Audit Oversight Committee, as I understand it, withdrew the offer. And so they are back searching for a chief audit executive. So that position has not been filled for a number of months in the county government.
But you think the process is in place in the present org act to accommodate when something like that happens? So they're moving adroitly to fill the spot at this time?
I don't know that I can answer that. I think it's been several months since the last, they've been for, I don't know exactly how long. Senator, and I'll try to get you how long that position has been open. I will say that a 30-day window to appoint in governmental world is very difficult.
That's great. No, thank you very much. When we have I think Zach's working on trying to get us a little staff, we'll talk about later. That might be something we have them dialogue with you and bring us recommendations. But thank you so much. And we look forward to next session.
All right, so the next section is section 11. And section 11, as you will see, defines the roles of the presiding officer. And that is the individual who is charged with running the commission meetings and doing other administrative duties for the Board of Commissioners. The presiding officer is not paid anything extra to be presiding officer. He or she holds that and receives the same salary that the remaining members of the commission receive. And the presiding officer's rules that govern him or her are set forth in section 11. They are also set forth in Robert's Rules of Order, which a lot of you all are very familiar with because many of you have served on a number of boards and committees. This is an old version one I keep at home. But there are certain parliamentary rules that govern the role of a presiding officer. And just generally, the way that it works in DeKalb and the way that the commission acts is the presiding officer is supposed to keep control of the meeting, make sure everybody behaves. Senator Henson's making sure everybody votes. He should have the least to say about a specific item. And if he wanted to enter the fray or the argument or wanted to have a strong discussion about it, it's very easy. He just yields the gavel so that someone else is keeping control. So the role of presiding officer really is to run the meeting and run the activities of the board to a certain limited extent. Obviously, each member of the Board of Commissioners is an elected official. He or she has staff. They run their office. They run their own legislative agenda, their own independent activities of their office, and the presiding officer has nothing to say over any of that. But that's generally what a presiding officer does. Section 11 also defines, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on section 11. We're going to slow down just a little bit because it talks about the power, it begins to talk about the power of the chief executive officer and the powers of the presiding officer. So if you look at section 11, section 11 defines when the chief executive officer has the authority to vote. So if you think of our Board of Commissioners on its dais on Tuesday, the CEO does not preside at the BOC meetings any longer, does not have a vote. The only time the CEO can vote on a matter at a meeting is in the event there is a tie vote. Okay, I'm gonna say that again. That rarely happens. How that could happen is Commissioner Patrick is absent. There are only 6 commissioners on any given day, and an item comes up and 3 vote yes and 3 vote no, and the CEO can break the tie. And there is a process which you will go through once you get, and I'll be glad to go through it with you in the standing procedural rules once we get done with the Organizational Act, of how the CEO is called and summoned and how that process works to allow him to vote. Because oftentimes CEO may or may not be at a commission meeting all day long. He may come in, make a presentation, and then he goes back to his functions, job duties. He does not necessarily, in fact, when we were in person, he did not sit downstairs in the commission meeting every day, all day long, every Tuesday. There are 2 areas where the CEO cannot break a tie vote, okay? The CEO cannot break a tie vote in any area which he is prohibited to veto, by veto, prohibited from veto. Ooh. So generally 2 areas we've discussed previously. The absolute authority and responsibility for zoning lies with the Board of Commissioners. So if it is a zoning issue, he cannot break a tie vote. If it is an issue relating to the rules regulating the commission, he cannot break a tie vote. There have been times in the past, and it happens, it doesn't happen all the time, but there are tie votes. And the CEO typically is in the building or is available on Zoom and shows up and decides what he or she is going to do. So that is where the tie vote section is found in the organization. The second paragraph, subsection B, defines when you elect a presiding officer and a deputy presiding. And what it says is you do it at the first meeting, regular meeting in January, and I'm going to discuss for you the difference between what a regular meeting is and a special meeting is in the very next section. But the first regular meeting typically is the second Tuesday of January. And you elect a presiding officer and a deputy presiding officer, and those individuals hold that office for 1 year. It is an annual office. The presiding officer and the deputy presiding officer do not lose any of their rights. They have the right to vote. They have the right to do anything that a normal commissioner would have. The only sort of difference is that issue that I described about wielding the gavel when you wanted to enter into the discussion. And part of the reason for that is you don't want your chair to take over the discussion and not recognize members who raise their hand. Because every member should have an equal opportunity to speak and participate in the debate, which is why the chair has to pay so much attention and why Metelsky makes sure that Senator Henson sees raised hands. That's true in the Board of Commissioners as well. That's a very important right to be able to be recognized and have your say. The presiding officer presides at the meetings of the commission and has an additional 4 duties. He or she can individually call special meetings of the commission. The members are to be given 3 days advance notice of such special meeting. There are also open meeting requirements for calling a meeting of the commission in emergencies and extraordinary circumstances they don't negate this 3 days, but it is clearly, it's put in place so that our presiding officer right now is Commissioner Patrick. Commissioner Patrick can't call a specially called meeting when he knows everybody else is out of town except for 4 people he wants to vote on one thing, right? And he wouldn't do that. The other subsection is subsection 2, and that is the ability to appoint the members and chairpersons of all the committees. And the committees are established by the commission in its rules and its standing procedural rules. And he or she is given the authority to establish and fill any vacancies. So if a commissioner decides that he or she no longer wants to be on a particular committee, then and wants to resign, those appointments may be rejected by a majority vote of the total membership of the commission. The word total is a little unclear to me. In Robert's Rules of Order, entire means everybody who's on the commission at the time the vote is taken. So if there are vacancies on the commission, the majority would be a different number if there's vacancies. Under Robert's Rules of Order, the word fixed means if you said the majority vote of the fixed membership, that is all of the spots. So in my example, if you use, so I'm not sure what total means. I choose to think it means fixed, but it is not as precise. So entire, in my example, would be assume that there is a vacancy in District 1. That means that there are only 6 members of the commission, so a majority of 6. And fixed would be a majority of 7. I sort of take the position that all those words don't really mean anything because we're going to get to section 12 where it's really super simple and clear. It takes 4 votes to do anything. And so, but I did want to raise that with you. The presiding officer is given the authority to compel attendance of members at the meetings of the commission by subpoena if necessary, and to exercise such other powers and duties that are given to him or her in the rules and regulations. And there are a couple of extra powers that are given to the presiding officer in the standing procedure. Subsection D is a very important section. Subsection D deals with vacancies. And I am going to go through this section line by line so that you understand what it is. So in the event that, and I'm going to use Commissioner Patrick's position on the commission becomes vacant, or if he is absent for any reason, or in the event, God forbid, something should happen to our CEO, and under previous sections, Commissioner Patrick as presiding officer serves for a temporary basis as interim CEO, then the deputy presiding officer becomes the presiding officer. He or she is immediately lifted to the position. There's not a new vote of the commission. There is no change. So in my example for this year, if there was some reason that Commissioner Patrick's position became vacant, Commissioner Marita Davis Johnson is the deputy. She would become the presiding officer for the Board of Commissioners as set forth in this section. And she would exercise those powers so long as Commissioner Patrick's position was vacant.
Vivian, I think Carla Drenner had a question.
Yes.
I do, thank you. And I don't mean to move ahead of your explanation, but I just wondered if this is the particular section that came into play a few years ago when former Commissioner Lee May was elevated to the CEO position.
Yes.
Yes. So and that leaves the vacancy of the commission seat under this section. Are you following my question? So,
and Representative Drenner, it actually is the interplay between subsection D here. And I'm going to go back and
While you look at that, I'll welcome both Mrs. Carla Drenner, Representative Drenner, who wasn't there when we did the roll, and Karen Bennett also joined us at some point.
it is the interplay representative between this subsection D and section 6, which deals with vacancies that we discussed in the very first meeting.
okay,
Those 2 sections at play.
thank you.
And the deputy presiding officer serves as presiding officer until the next election in January. Yes, sir. Mr. Wittenstein, you've got a question?
Yeah, sort of related. Who has the power to set the agenda for commission meetings? Is that the presiding officer? Who gets to decide what items get put on the agenda?
So the way that it works in DeKalb, the CEO presents a recommended executive agenda on the first and third Tuesdays of the month, and we'll get to the actual agenda setting in the powers. But to your question, each Tuesday, the Board of Commissioners sits at a committee of the whole, and they go through each item on the agenda. Now, they don't technically vote on it, but they do sort of what Senator Henson did with your minutes. We're going to send this to the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee, and it's going to go on the preliminary, or we're going to put this on the consent agenda. So they do it by as a group in their committee of the whole meeting on the first and third Tuesdays of the month on TV. So everybody sees the agenda, everybody sees what is on it. There have been times when there has been inclement weather or we've not been able to have a committee of the whole meeting. And in that instance, then the presiding officer does present the agenda to the Board of Commissioners. But that is very few and far between.
So is there a vote then on what goes to the agenda? And here's the reason that I asked. Early in City of Dunwoody's days, we had one commissioner who said, I'm going to put this on every agenda until we resolve it. And, every time there was an agenda, he used his authority as a member of the city council to add it to the agenda of every meeting. And we had to change the charter to say that it took two people to put something on the agenda so that we could prevent this from coming up over and over and over again. How would a single member of the commission who wants something discussed, is that just automatically put on the agenda? Does he have to get 4 votes to get it on the agenda? How does that work?
Okay, so that is addressed. It's
I can hold the thought if it's coming up.
No, we talked about it. I'm gonna go back to it. So Mr. Metelsky, would you go back to page 13 of 39? And if you'll come up so that it's easy for everybody to see number 20. Thank you. So there was a pretty large change to the organizational act. It used to be that the CEO presided over board meetings and the CEO set the agenda. And in 2008, 2007, somewhere in that range, that was changed and gave the Board of Commissioners the authority to set the agenda. And so if you'll look at subsection 20, it provides that the Board of Commissioners has the power to prepare an agenda for meetings of the commission. But here's the answer to your question. The commission shall accept agenda items by the CEO upon motion by any commissioner to be placed upon the agenda pursuant to the rules by which an item may be placed on the agenda by a member of the commission. So in the standing procedural rules, which we will get to when we get done to the org act, so that's going to be a couple of meetings, but I'm going to briefly describe it to you. If you are at a committee of the whole, they don't take votes because it's not technically a committee. Commissioner Marita Davis Johnson says, I would like to add an item to the agenda. She can do that unilaterally. She adds it to the agenda. If on the other hand, and the CEO can add an item, then he presents it to the executive committee and Commissioner Rader says, yep, I agree with the CEO. That item needs to be added. It doesn't have to have 2 votes, 4 votes, just one motion. If on the other hand, the item is going to be added at an actual board meeting, okay, at a regular board meeting, then the rules, they have put the rules in place for themselves that you got to have a motion to add. So that takes 4 votes and then a motion to add. So in answer to your question, you're a single commissioner could add it to every committee of the whole unilaterally. So as it is currently drafted based on section 20 and the procedural rules, that could occur. But when we get to the procedural rules, I am going to discuss with you a concept called normal forcing, which is known only in DeKalb. As far as I can tell, it's not done anywhere else in the world, but I will get to that when we get to it. And that's the ability to move something or delay it for 2 weeks upon the motion of just one committee. It's a procedural task. So going back to presiding officer, I did want to spend some time on that because I knew that you all were going to be looking at that. So section 12, meeting. This section is a very important section. It's a very little section. A lot of folks would think that it is not important, but it is important because it defines very clearly what it takes to transact business. All right. So The commission can hold regular meetings, and the regular meetings, as you see, are the second and fourth Tuesday. Oftentimes, the commission have specially called meetings on the committee of the whole day. That's usually when I go into executive session, they will convene a specially called meeting. I talk about real estate or I talk about litigation, and they come out and handle that. So they do have specially called meetings. They can have specially called meetings at other times, but my board has been pretty good about trying to keep them at the same time so that everybody knows what's happening. There is once every 2 months, they have a night zoning meeting that they hold. And when we were back in session pursuant to their rule, we had to take the show on the road, and we would go around the county and have a committee of the whole meeting in various areas of the county. Obviously, Zoom has changed the whole world about all of that in terms of folks participating. And we're, for example, in our zoning meetings, folks are loving to do it by Zoom because they don't want to come sit down in the Maloof Center from 6 p.m. until 11 p.m. to watch their zoning case. They would much rather sit at home and do that, and they're able to do that right now. The CEO can call the meeting, the presiding officer, and any 4 members of the commission. But again, it's a 3-day notice in advance of such meetings. I will say this board and every board that I've been here since 2001, when they've held meetings, there's just not been an issue. Everybody you've got to give notice under the Open Meetings Act. So that has not been an issue where you've seen board members trying to use the ability to call a meeting to engender some sort of decision. No official action shall be taken by the commission except in a meeting which is open to the public. That is a requirement of state law, but it is also repeated in our organizational act. And here's the important sentence. Presiding officer and any 3 members of the commission or any 4 members of the commission, exclusive of the presiding officer, shall constitute a quorum. So you can have less number to either adjourn or recess the meeting, but no official action shall be taken except upon the affirmative vote of at least 4 members of the commission or 3 members and the presiding officer. That's a very simple sentence, but it is so very helpful because it clearly defines how many people does it take to pass. And so when you go to defend actions in court, and you'll hear the CEO says it all the time, you gotta get 4 votes. If you're gonna do anything, you've got to get 4 votes. And so I love that. I love that sentence because it is clear, it is precise, and it is simple about what is required for official action. And then just as a matter of caution, the presiding officer is given the same voting rights as any member of the commission. All right, so that ends, and that section has not been changed. One of the few sections that has not been changed since 1981. It remains unchanged since the original organization, which I thought was interesting. All right, so we are, what time are we at? We are at 7. Are you, Senator Henson, how would you like to proceed? You usually like me to stop at an hour.
Well, I would like you to try to go a little bit farther. I don't think we're gonna, bog down too as much on the bylaws. So if you could keep going for about another 20 minutes.
Yeah,
then
absolutely.
we'll preserve 15 minutes at the end. We've got hopefully a public meeting for the next one, but I'm sure everybody would be willing to stay a couple minutes longer if we have a lot of public comment.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna spend some time in this section. So I am gonna go through this section. We will not get through section 13 tonight. Let me just set some expectations. We won't get to the end of it tonight because it is an extremely long section and has a lot of provisions within it.
If you find a good spot and part anytime in 15 to 25
I will do
minutes.
that. But I just wanted to, I spent a very long time, the entire meeting on the power of the Board of Commissioners. And I wanted to give the same dignity to the power of the CEO. And it makes sense at this juncture because we've now sort of ended the power structure for the board, auditing, meetings, presiding officer, and now we're moving into the areas that are within the CEO's control. So the CEO, the first sentence is the CEO is given the exclusive power to supervise, direct, and control the administration of the county government. So he is given that exclusive power, but it is also his responsibility. And that is where you realize that it is a true executive branch, because it is supervising, directing, and controlling the administration of the government, whereas the Board of Commissioners is given policy-making authority within various areas. The next sentence reflects the balance of authority, because it says the chief executive should carry out, execute, and enforce all ordinances, policies, rules, and regulations of the commission when such ordinances, policies, rules, and regulations become effective. The reason that the term effective is used is because in a variety of errors, the board adopts and then the CEO either approves or vetoes. And an ordinance either does not become effective until he approves or vetoes, or the time passes and does not become effective and we're going to get to veto in the event, unless and until, if he does veto, unless and until the board overrides the veto. The members of the commission shall deal solely through the chief executive or his executive assistant. This is very confusing to members of the public, and it's why we don't call Mr. Williams an executive assistant. Everybody thinks that means an administrative assistant. And so every time I put an ordinance together and I use the term executive assistant, they think, why are you putting a secretary in charge of that? And that's not the case. You think of Mr. Williams, we call him the chief operating officer. Think of him as the county manager. It's just a different word, but it is misspelled in the original organizational act. So it says executive assistant. And so the parentheses is to reflect that the right word is assistant. So members of the commission shall deal solely through either the CEO and Mr. Thurmond, or in this case right now, Mr. Williams, in all matters concerning the operation, supervision, and administration of the various departments, agencies, offices, and agencies of the county government. No member of the commission shall directly or indirectly order, instruct, or otherwise attempt to control the actions of county personnel subject to the administrative and supervisory control of the chief executive. And nothing herein, so nothing herein in this section, so this is the entire section, not just section A, shall be construed to preclude any commissioner from seeking information necessary to the establishment of policy from any person, including any employee of DeKalb County. Section B is the authority to reorganize government. It is a limited executive power. So it is not an unfettered power, which is not unusual. Starts with subject to approval of the commission. The CEO shall have the power to change, consolidate, or abolish any departments, agencies, or offices over which the CEO exercises supervision. So he can't do a thing to the Board of Commissioners. He can't do anything to the other constitutional offices. He can't do anything to the judicial branch. He can't do anything to the sheriff. He can't do anything to the tax commissioner. He can change, abolish, reorganize departments within county government that are under his control. Obviously, we just talked about the internal audit. He does not have any power over internal audit. But there are some limits. Number one, the first limit is the approval of the commission. And the second limit is that the Department of Finance is required to be maintained as a separate and distinct department of county government and may not be abolished by the CEO or the commission. So there is a limitation in subsection B on both the CEO's power, but also the commission's power to abolish the Department of Finance. Subject to approval of the commission, the CEO may create other departments, agencies, and offices, which, when they are created, departments, agencies, and offices shall be under the supervision and control of the chief executive. And so that is, it is a limited authority and responsibility and does require approval of the commission. Now we get to C1. C1, Zach, where are you? This is C1 deals with me and deals with Zach Williams. And so I want to go through that and give you an understanding of, I'm going to give you a little bit of an understanding about my role, because my role is not necessarily defined in the Organizational Act. It is typically defined by the state bar rules. Zach Williams' role is defined in section 14 of the Organizational Act, but here is what it says about the county attorney and the executive assistant. So the CEO appoints Mr. Williams and Ms. Ernst, but both Zach and I must be confirmed by the Board of Commissioners in an open meeting in public. So in order for me to become county attorney, I was appointed by the CEO and my appointment was then forwarded to the Board of Commissioners, who took a vote and voted to appoint me as county attorney. And that is true whether it's Vivian Earnstis or anyone else. That is also true of Mr. Williams. No member of the commission is allowed to nominate a person for the position of executive assistant or county attorney. Within budgetary limitations, the CEO sets my salary and sets Mr. Williams' salary. Both of said officers, so I do not have a property interest in my employment. I am an at-will employee, so to speak, as is Mr. Williams. The CEO can fire me, and the CEO can fire Mr. Williams. 5 members of the commission can also discharge Mr. Williams or me. So it requires more than 4, but it requires 5 votes for the Board of Commissioners to have us removed from office. I am, as county attorney, and this is similar to at least most of the major metropolitan counties. I am the lawyer for more than the CEO and the Board of Commissioners. Mr. Williams spends most of his time, except for budget processes, with the executive and legislative branch. I represent the sheriff, so I represent all of the elected county officers in DeKalb County except for the district attorney and the superior court judge. A lot of that representation has been, and who represents who, has been decided by the Attorney General for the state of Georgia, and some decisions by both the state court system and the federal court system, and deal with a complicated concept of county officers. So I represent all of the judicial branch. I represent the tax commissioner. I represent the Board of Tax Assessors. I represent all 52 departments. I handle all litigation that is filed against the county related to civil matters. I also am in charge, when authorized to do so by the Board of Commissioners, to file affirmative litigation, which we don't do very often. We don't see very many people. But if we are going to file suit, I have to get authority. And my role and the rules and obligations with respect to conflicts of interest are heavily governed by the State Bar of Georgia and the disciplinary committees and the ability to make complaints. And my professional standards are required by the State Bar rules and the rules of professional conduct imposed by the State Bar of Georgia. And if I violate those rules, they can take away my bar license. You can imagine those are the rules that I don't ever take lightly, because I don't want to give up this bar license. I like this job and I like being a lawyer. So just for you all to know, I think there had been some questions about who was I the lawyer for, and that is not unusual for the county attorney to be the lawyer for a number of different officials. If there is a conflict of interest, then, I work through hiring outside counsel. And, that sometimes happens in our public safety lawsuits, where there could be a conflict of interest or differing versions of facts. And so I wanted you all to understand C1 is solely related to the executive assistant and the county attorney. C2 is also a limited, the CEO's power to hire and fire employees is also limited in C2. So in C2, the CEO, again, it says subject to confirmation by the commission, the CEO shall appoint the planning director, the finance director, and the merit system director. So
Madam-
again, yes,
I'm sorry, Miss Nugent does have her hand raised.
yes, ma'am.
Vivian, I was just going back to our earlier discussion on this. What provision is there in the charter when the commission does not confirm either the executive assistant or the county attorney or the other three positions? What provision is there to address that if those positions are not confirmed?
There is not, I'll look at that, Ms. Nugent, but I think that it remains on the agenda until action is taken or it's voted down. I don't think that the CEO has the power to then just appoint, right? He's got to get, or she has got to get confirmation by the commission in order for Mr. Williams or I to serve. There's no default provision in the org act that I know of. I'll look and make sure I am right, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. If he doesn't have 4 votes, I don't get appointed.
And if it did fail, the CEO could rationalize that the time would be appropriate to nominate someone else and try to get more
Might be
votes.
the case, yes,
So
sir.
he could withdraw that and do that.
Yes, that's correct. I will say that in the entire time that I have been here, both of those individuals have gotten unanimous votes. Folks like us want to have support of both sides of the aisle, so to speak. But to your question, Ms. Nugent, there is not a provision that falls back and allows the CEO to appoint in the event the board does not confirm.
Ms.
Thank you.
Hinkle has her hand raised as well.
Yes, Vivian, can you explain to me who's covered under the merit system and who's
Yep.
not under the merit system? Thank you.
Yep, I'm getting ready. I will get to that in just a second. I want to give the commission an understanding of what merit system means. So there are 4 positions in DeKalb County that are deemed to be subject to, again, with no ability to appoint unilaterally, to require confirmation by the board. So that is your director of finance, your planning director, and your merit system director. So that's who you all think of as your human resources director. And then the second sentence says that no member of the commission shall be authorized to nominate any such person. So very similar to me and to the county attorney, but very differently from us. All 3 of those officers are under the DeKalb County merit system and subject to the regulations of said merit system, and subject to budgetary limitations, the CEO sets the salaries for those employees as well. In Georgia, Georgia is an at-will state. You are hired by most companies. You can be hired and fired for any reason except for an illegal reason. And what I mean by that when I'm teaching lawyers about this is I can't be hired because can't be hired or fired because I'm white, black, those kinds of illegal reasons. But if tomorrow I were in a private law firm and the managing partner walked in and said, you know what, Vivian, it's just not working out and I really just, your services are no longer needed. It is a terminable at will state. Serve at the place. Same would be for me as county attorney. In county governments, state law has authorized county governments to create merit systems. Merit systems, you hear about it in the federal government. They call them civil service employees. You hear about it when you talk about teachers who get tenure. And so what a merit system means is that an employee has a property interest in his or her job. And simplistically, he or she cannot be fired except for cause. And in order to be fired, he or she has to be given procedural due process. So, brief opportunity to ask questions, talk about it, be given the notice, followed by a full-blown hearing process. That whole merit system process and the list of employees, Ms. Hinkle, are in chapter 20 of the code. So the merit process is called personnel, and there is a hearing officer, there is a merit system counsel, there are a list of the reasons you can be fired, there is a list of the departments and the individuals within a department who are not merit protected. So I'll give you a good example of someone who is not merit protected. I have 21 lawyers. They serve at the pleasure. They are not merit protected. That is not unusual for department heads and for upper management and for folks who are with, some sort of degrees. Lawyers, often there are very few times where lawyers are civil service protected, at least in the local governments I'm familiar with. There could be others. I think in the federal system, they have more protection. But the decision was made in 81 that these 4 positions were important enough that they should be merit protected, and they remain merit protected today. Now, so that deals with 4 department heads and the county attorney and the county manager. Then we're going to move to the rest of the employment force within DeKalb, and this is the last section I'm going to do because we'll move to something. It moves to another topic, Senator. So this is a good stopping point. What Section D says is subject to budgetary limitations and the merit system regulation. The CEO has the exclusive authority to appoint, remove, and fix the compensation of all employee and officials of the county, with a couple of huge caveats. The CEO can't do anything about folks employed by the commission. Central staff, their employees, those folks are hired and fired by the commissioners or the board of commissioners, and cannot do anything about deputies or employees of elected county offices. CEO can't fire a deputy sheriff. CEO can't fire an employee in the tax commission. CEO doesn't have any authority over the employees in the judicial branch of government. So he has no authority in the judicial branch, no authority in the legislative branch. He has authority in the executive branch, which is very typical. And that's what that subsection D states. The last sentence of subsection D says the compensation of persons filling offices and positions created by state statutes shall be fixed by the CEO within budgetary limitations when such state statutes authorize or require such compensation to be fixed by county governments or by county governing authorities. That's rare. Most of the time, the salaries of the other elected officials in counties is set by state law. Judges, tax commissioner, DA, solicitor, those kinds of things. And Senator, I think it's 7:25, so I'm 5 minutes over the time, but this is a good stopping point. And we're almost to the end of section 13, so we got a little farther. But also it'll give folks an opportunity to digest what I've talked about, and maybe at our next meeting, we can just open it up to questions on the folks having.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Yeah, I have a few brief remarks. Mainly want to thank everybody again for their work, and met with the CEO the other day, and he wants to thank everybody for their dedication and work on this matter. It's very important that our county review these charters and do what we can to make sure that they work for the citizens. Secondly, I want to state that I continue to meet with other people who are interested. Anybody who's on here and members of the public that would like to come meet with me and bring information or thoughts are welcome to contact me. Met with Doug Teeper, who did a study. He was former state representative, did a study in 1996 with the delegation. He brought a bunch of old information that I will compile with other stuff that I'm collecting. And when we do have staff, I'm sure before we bring up the issues that we may want to change next year, we'll get everybody a little more information and data. Secondly, I want to mention that Zach Williams is working hard to see that we do have some help. And I think they brought up at Tuesday's meeting the question of getting contract to get us some staffing, and that was brought up. Mr. Williams turned his lights on, so he might want to just address that. Mr. Williams, what's our status there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so we presented to the Ops Committee. It went through the process that Vivian laid out earlier. First, it goes to Committee of the Whole. They set it on the Ops Committee, which is the County Operations Committee agenda. It was heard on Tuesday, and this is a contract for service using the Carl Vinson Institute to provide support to the Charter Review Commission. It received a due pass recommendation in that committee meeting. I anticipate it going before it will go before the board next Tuesday. And I would anticipate that it will, the entire board will accept the recommendation of the committee and pass that. So as soon as that happens, we will finalize the contract and the services of the Carl Vinson Institute.
We appreciate all your work on that, your dedication to make that happen. And we're being tracked. We have a couple of guests today who are from Carl Vinson, hoping to work with us, and even as we speak, learning what we're doing. Thank you. Next, I want to just thank Mary Hinkle for all the work she's done. When we talk about our location of a future meeting, her name will come up again. She's also worked with the IT department. We will, have a place on the webpage that people can leave messages, and those messages will go to myself and the vice chair and the secretary. When we have staff, we'll have those messages go there, and I'm sure all of you will be informed of any contacts or information we're getting from the public, or any recommendations that they have for us or comments they have will be ultimately shared with the entire commission. And also, she has worked with IT, just discussing the possibility of emails, and if you want to contact her personally, or she might make a brief comment here. But it is possible the county provide a county email if you're interested. There is a browser that you have to go through, and passwords, and it changes every 60 days. So it's totally up to you whether you want to go through that problem. Ms. Hinkle, do you have anything to say?
No, I think you've covered it. I'll reach out to all of the Board of Commissioners here and share that information with you so you can make that decision.
Thank you. And, at some time in the future, we'll get out a higher membership list and phone numbers to commission members if we haven't already. Thank you very much. I want to go ahead and reserve my other remarks. We're bringing up to unfinished business, which is bylaws. So I will just mention that the CEO and myself did meet about the bylaws. We had a discussion last time. The bylaws as they were presented last time said there would be a vote of 5 for really all matters except for the final report, or those that changed the executive order, and I can read that. he is very interested in our work being successful. And he knows that the legislature, especially, and the public want to make sure that we've got, a lot of support for whatever we do or whatever recommendations we bring up or handle. So he had suggested we have 7 votes. So we talked about it for procedural. The recommendation that I'll bring to you in a second, or amendment that was emailed to you, would say for procedural matters, because we have a quorum of 8, we may get started. We may want to approve minutes or have procedural issues that are only requiring 5 votes. But if there's something of substance, true import that we're going to bring up, an issue that we want to discuss that may be controversial, it requires 7 votes. There are presently about 12 of us on the internet right now, and usually there'll be more than 14 people. So really, that's not asking too much that we have 7 votes. In most cases, that will be a majority of our quorum. So I think this allows us to move forward if we're short on simple matters, but make sure that we have a more broad consensus when we move forward with anything important. So I think his points were well brought and will make us stronger. So I'm going to recommend that the original bylaws that we sent out and discussed at our last meeting are amended. You received an email today, and that email, I could go over, read it, but that email basically said that for procedural matters, there would be 5 votes. For substantive matters, at least 7 votes. And anything that would be in our final report or changing the charter and our recommendations or final report would take 10 votes, which is presently in the CEO's executive order. So at this time, I would like a motion to adopt the amendment that I'm recommending, which was supported by the CEO and myself, and make that change, and then we'll bring up the bylaws again for a discussion. So anybody, there's been a motion, a second.
I second Karen Bennett.
Thank you. Moved and second to amend the bylaws that were presented last meeting. Is there any objection or discussion? Okay, I'm going to take a roll call of this amendment to keep my attorney happy. So all in favor will say aye. Virginia Harris. Virginia Harris was on another call. She may come on, but Virginia Claudette Leak?
No.
No. Mary Hinkle?
No.
Lance Hammond?
No.
Robert Wittenstein?
Vote aye.
Susan Nugent?
No.
Bobby Sanford? Not available. Clara DeLay?
I'm somewhat confused. Do we have another alternative if we don't vote for this?
Yeah, we'll have a couple alternatives. One would be to defer action on the bylaws themselves until a future meeting. Or 2 would be pass the bylaws as they were previously passed out if there's a motion to do that. Those would be the 2 most obvious unless someone else had an amendment to bring forward.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. And John Battelle, someone, Mary, you keeping track of the votes? Or is
Yes.
that- Thank you. Jim Grubiak, did he come with on? Jim Grubiak, I'm sorry. Dwight Thomas, is he still with us? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Vicky Turner,
Yes.
thank you. Carla Drenner,
Yes.
thank you. Karen Bennett,
Yes.
I think Gerald Lawson Senior was not present. He arrived. Emmanuel Jones, has he arrived?
No.
And I believe, Ms. Turner, that Claudette and Mary Hinkle and Karen are all here. So I don't know that your vote would be necessary.
Chairman Henson,
Yes,
this is Virginia Harris. My vote is yes.
thank you very much, Ms. Harris. Has anyone else arrived that?
I don't believe so, but if anyone is on the commission and we haven't recognized you, please identify by using the raise hand feature. None at this time, sir.
Okay. And of course, I'll be a yes vote since I recommended it if necessary, but yes, there's a vote going on. So Ms. Hinkle, did you record the vote?
Yes, you have 7 ayes and 4 nays.
Okay.
Excuse me. Did we get a vote from John Turner?
John Turner is actually listed as an alternate, and if Claudette Lee, Mary Hinkle, and Karen Bennett were not all here, I would have accepted his vote.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all right with you, John? Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Hearing no further comment, this is a vote to 7-4 and the motion passes. Thank you very much. So the bylaws are amended and we have bylaws in front of us. I would ask that the commission adopt these bylaws. They provide many things, including us telling the public when the next meetings are, provide a structure. If we don't have bylaws, we would then be forced to operate basically with Robert Rules of Order. And I think that these bylaws offer the public a lot of protection and advantages. So Mary Hinkle, I see your hand raised for discussion.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that one of the members of the commission had a typo, a capitalization in one area that needs to be fixed. I will pass that along to Ms. Sanford for to correct this in our bylaws. And also participation meetings, we need to insert the word "at," but again, I will identify that for, if I have a Word version of this, I will make those changes, but they're 2 minor corrections. Thank you.
Okay, without objection, those are 2 minor corrections with no substantive meaning, so they'll be corrected. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes as we presented? Thank you.
Ms. Nugent has her hand raised, I believe.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Nugent. Ms. Nugent.
Yes, thank you. Having just adopted the amendment to the bylaws before we adopt the bylaws, I'm just wondering if you are going to referee the distinction between what is procedural and what is substantive, or if we need to clarify that as in some way by definition, or just simply that you would be the referee to do that.
That would, certainly I would try to make the obvious call, but that would be the chairman's call. And if you want to bring forth at some time next meeting some clarification, but that is the intent, is for the chair to make that decision, and I would try to do so fairly. Thank you.
So that satisfies me, just a procedure for us to get it done. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments? Do I have a motion to approve the bylaws?
So moved.
Got a motion as a second?
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve the bylaws. I'll go down the rolls. Vice Chair Virginia Harris, still with us? Yeah, aye or nay to approve the bylaws?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again?
We have bylaws before us that I would like to approve, that we are voting on. A aye vote would, or a yes vote would pass and approve the bylaws. A no vote would be opposed to the bylaws as presented.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Claudette Leak?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Mary Hinkle?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lance Hammonds,
Yes.
Mr. Robert Wintenstein,
Yes.
Susan Nugent,
Yes.
Clara DeLay,
Yes.
Jim Grubiak, not present. Dwight Thomas, he's here. I'll go to Vicky Turner,
Yes.
Carla Drenner,
Yes.
Karen Bennett. She was in getting the car. She may not be there. Gerald Lawson is not here. Emmanuel Jones, I don't believe here. And Dwight Thomas, a second call.
And I'm sending him an unmute request. He is still on, but he may have stepped away.
Yeah, he may have stepped away. Last call for votes. Hearing none. Ms. Hinkle, do you have the vote?
I have 9 acceptances. Yes.
9 yes. Thank you. Appreciate the bylaws being approved. If any time during the course of our meetings you feel they are insufficient for our actions, we can always amend them. Thank you. Next, we have the discussion of new business, and under new business, we do have the discussion of our next meeting location. Mary Hinkle had done some work on that and looked at colleges and other places. Libraries are closed on Thursday. We looked at the DeKalb County College, or now Georgia State on Memorial Drive. And at present, we have not resolved that as a meeting location. We might get Zachary Williams involved. And he might be able to get the Maloof Center if that doesn't work. What I would like to do is just briefly see if there's any objection to our next meeting, September 1st, which is a few days before a holiday, to be a in-person meeting. That's the main thing. Are y'all willing to come somewhere in this county in person on our next meeting, September 1st?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay.
I'm certainly willing to consider it, but I would ask that we also be mindful of whatever the numbers start to look like between now and then.
Thank you. Thank you. We will hopefully, things will continue about the same. Wherever we locate, it will be a large location where people won't, if public comes, they won't have to sit next to each other, and that we would be able to spread out. And anybody that has health concerns would certainly be excused without any negative thoughts or ramifications. So we will, look at a good place and get it to you and set our agenda. We may not have, if we don't have a giant public, we'll make sure that we have other business to do if the public does not fill our time.
And Chair Henson, it appears Ms. Turner has her hand raised.
Ms. Turner?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just two things. Would you give that proposed date for that meeting again? I didn't get it.
The meetings they're going to be the first Thursday of the month till further notified, and that would be September 1st.
Okay, just September 4th. That's what I need. And then also, I would just echo what I believe it was Clara said, just be cognizant of what the numbers are at that particular time, and then make a prudent decision. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will also mention to Ms. Turner too, Mary Hinkle may contact you sometime to see if a school is available, or if that's, or even a possibility to have a meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. I look forward.
Thank you very much. Now, is there any other new business that anyone wants to bring before the board? Madam Vice Chair? Madam Secretary?
No, sir.
Thank you. That being so, we will go to public comment, and I appreciate the public for being so patient. We would limit the presentations to 3 minutes, and John Metelsky will be our referee so that he can draw the ire of you when he cuts your microphone off.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, just as a reminder, if you can keep them to 3 minutes or less, no profane or derogatory comments, please, and state your name and address, and I'll remind you, but please state your name and address for the record. So let's go ahead. If you wanted to speak now, please use the raise hand feature. Don't see anyone on a regular phone, so #2 there, but use the raise hand feature. Or you could clap use your clap feature there. Anyone, I know some people can't find the raise hand feature sometimes. All right, does not appear, we have about 4 or 5 folks on that aren't county, and doesn't appear that we're getting any hands raised at this time, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for meeting with us today. Those of you that are in public and watching us, we hope that you will help spread the word. September 1st will be our first of 5 meetings. Hopefully they will be public. We may do some of those 5 via Zoom if the COVID situation does provide problems for us. But we would like you to help spread the word that September 1st we'll be having a public meeting. Keep an eye on our webpage, Mary Hinkle. How do people go to the county and find when we do post our location?
If you just Google DeKalb County Charter Review Commission, it takes you to a page that's under the CEO's office, and it's there. All of our meetings are being listed. The agendas are being posted, minutes posted after they are approved, and all the documents are by the scheduled meeting. Once we get our contact us set up, if you have any trouble finding anything, you can contact us and we'll get back with you.
Thank you. We'll try to set a location as soon as we can. We have Vivian Ernst who will see if I broke any laws.
No, you haven't, sir. I just wanted to, perhaps as you're advertising this, all of your meetings are public. Is this a public hearing pursuant to the public hearing part of the executive order?
This will be what we consider a public hearing, and we'll try to meet the
Okay. So
executive
it's a little
order.
bit different than a public, everything that you do is just for the public. You know all this, all of you know this, but to the extent what you're talking about for September 1st is actually a public hearing.
Correct.
You would
And-
have you'd have comments from the public and a public hearing format, correct?
Correct. And that is
Okay.
will be the primary focus. One of the things the CEO did in his executive orders to make sure that this was a forum for the public to bring out information and suggestions to improve our county government. Thank you. Hearing no other business, is there any other business? Hearing no other business, I'll open it up for a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
So moved. Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any objections? Hearing none, thank you for your time and good night.